Nobody threw. Yes. Good day, everybody. Thank you so much for coming to the session. I know it's, well, early. It's 10 a.m. My name is Kerry Finch, and I am the co-founder of Also Known As. We help shape reputation, we build reputation, we help clarify thought leadership for brands and creative businesses. I also ask difficult questions. So that's what we're doing today. We're talking about, obviously, the next digital wave excludes millions. Hey, let's fix it. I would love if people in the back row would move forward. Because you, sir, you know who you know. I asked you already. This woman here is going to the airport. She's fine. Everybody else, including you, Nick, who I demanded sit in the front row. It's much better for the speakers if you all move forward. You, sir, you can stay where you are. Brilliant. Thank you for your service. Okay, so what we're talking about today is, it sounds technical, but it's actually deeply human. 1 in 5 people are neurodivergent, and yet systems are still built for this mythical unicorn, the normal user. And that's what we're digging into today. We want to look at not just the why of neuro-inclusive design, but the how. And we want to also be able to look into the concept of what indeed is normal. Can I have a show of hands? Who thinks they're normal? I know for a fact that you are so not normal. I have proof that you're not normal. We'll move on. So I have 3 brainiacs on the stage with me, and they're all experts in their field. Please welcome, it's Ryan Howard, who's the co-lead of the Experience Institute at Google. It's Rachel Lowenstein, who is the co-founder of the New Project, and David Vogel, who is the Global Experience Director at Hypersolid. Please make them feel very welcome. In case you thought I was going to stand all the way through. Let's see who's in the audience just before we kick off. Who here is a technologist? Or indeed considers themselves to be a technologist, even if it's not in the title? Hands up if you're a technologist. And who works in a brand? Who works brand side? Who works directly in AI? And who works, or who self-identifies as a designer? Whether it's in your title or not. Oh, people don't even know. And who here self-identifies as neurodivergent in some way? There they are. Welcome. This is for everybody, this conversation, so please do ask questions at the end. We are up for it. We live for your questions, so get involved. And in fact, if you get excited and you want to queue until the end, it will be 45 minutes. You do you. Let's start. Ryan, let's start with you. The discussion is indeed, the next digital wave excludes millions. What does that even mean, specifically to you? What is the next digital wave? What are we talking about?
I think there's a lot of different definitions out there between consulting firms and whatever. But I think it kind of boils down to AI and specifically the impact of this agentic revolution, or whatever you want to call it. But really it's about systems becoming more autonomous, systems both in the experience we're living, like right then and there, that are helping shape that, but also the upstream systems that help deliver new buildings, new technologies, new products. All of those things are becoming more autonomous and more connected. But the risk there is that as they are heavily based on probabilistic methods and things like that, they kind of just start to move towards the middle. And so there's a lot more risk of all of that becoming a lot more efficient at moving towards the middle and just leaving out the edges. And maybe the middle is not even really a middle, it's just sort of an arbitrary point when you look at people.
So, Rachel, we're talking about excluding millions. What do we mean by that? What are we looking at? How could this be happening?
Yeah, I think it might help to start with a grounding of like, what is neurodiversity and what are we talking about with neuro-inclusive design. Is everyone familiar with the term neurodiversity, roughly? I think this is probably like a more informed audience than typical. So just for grounding, if anybody isn't familiar, neurodiversity is just this general concept. It can, a lot of people have different definitions of what it might be, but I think the most broadest sense in the way that I describe it with the partners that we work with is that there's a diverse way that people process information, experience the world, and communicate. And I think that's like a pretty obvious thing to understand, right? But when we look at how the world is designed, how technology is being designed, how education is built, how spaces are built and designed, you can immediately start to understand that's not really honored in the design ecosystem and the technology ecosystem, certainly, which we will talk about.
Yeah.
So just for context, I'm autistic, and the new project is we call it a kind of experimental creative nonprofit, where we undertake projects at the intersection of neurodiversity and creativity, all in pursuit of giving neurodivergent people job opportunities. So 80% of autistic folks are unemployed. It's the highest unemployment rate of any identity group. And a large part of that is because of these exclusions that take place in the real world. It is not a moral failure, it's not a personal failure, it's simply that the world is not designed for us. And I've been very privileged to be able to kind of figure it out. But when you talk to people who have OCD or have Tourette's or higher support needs autistic, there's a lot of challenges that exist in the world that mean that they can't experience the world to their full benefit. And from a business perspective, you can immediately see the opportunity that sits there.
So, David, where do we even begin to tackle these issues? Where do we start?
Well, I guess we've started already.
Hooray!
We've been grappling with this, I think, in one way or another for the longest time. But we've been coming at it from a fundamental limitation of resources, right? So we've always treated it as the extra edge case, the thing that we also need to consider, etc. And so I guess, and we'll talk about this more, but the fundamental shift that needs to happen is from this idea of the norm plus to just embracing that diversity as a default.
Okay.
And technology is allowing us to do that for, I guess, the first time. So we've been moving towards it, and we've been doing bits and bobs, but we're getting now to a place where we can start to really converge all those different efforts.
So if we're converging all those efforts, I mean, Rachel, if we're designing for everyone, what does that look like? Who is everyone?
There's a really simple design premise that a lot of designers use called, if you design for the margins, the mean will benefit. It's called the curb cut effect. I'm sure a lot of you know what the curb cut effect is. If you don't know what this is, it's essentially this idea that when you design for the most disadvantaged person in a given space, everyone benefits from it. And it comes from the disability activist movement, where in the 60s, wheelchair users were asking for curb cuts on sidewalks so they could actually move around their cities. And when city planners finally implemented it, who benefited? It was people with wheelchairs, but it was also mothers with strollers, it was city commuters, and suddenly you had a much more flourishing city because people were able to be more mobile in general. So, the conversation about accessibility is so, I think, sterile and compliance driven when it's actually this really huge creative opportunity that gets relegated as this kind of compliance exercise. But when you design for the margins, then everyone benefits. You have a much more flourishing experience for all people. And that can be in technology, it can be in physical spaces, it can be in so many different types of experiences.
And David, because I know that you've talked about the crash test dummy principle, as it were. Tell us more about that, because I find that really fascinating.
Yeah, so I guess at some point people started driving more cars and started also dying in droves in cars that were really almost anti-human.
They would die in droves.
Yes, yeah, they would die in great numbers.
Not hyperbole.
or be hurt, or somehow.
So they thought seatbelts would be good.
Seatbelts might be a good idea, having a steering column that doesn't sit right in front of your chest, etc. So it was really a brilliant idea to say, okay, let's start to test this. Let's put fake people in cars and crash those cars repeatedly.
And learn from it.
And learn from that and see where does this go wrong. And of course, this has been a brilliant exercise. However, the problem with it was that the crash test dummies were based on the average human. And the average human apparently is 5'9" and 170 pounds.
And male.
And male, right? So this whole idea of a human already excluded half the population. But
And
even,
tall people.
well, exactly. Even by its own standards, it was failing because there are actually very few people who are exactly 5'9" and 170 pounds and don't have other characteristics that might not correspond with what a crash test dummy is like, right? I mean, it could be that you have conditions that make you extra sensitive to certain crashes, etc. But again, yeah, I mean, the most important point, of course, is that children, women are not considered, and as a result, did not benefit to the same degree from all these implementations that were made.
I think too, and from a very practical standpoint, when you can start to think how this actually applies from a cognitive well-being perspective for people, how many of you have felt overwhelmed at South by in the last week? Yeah, same. And if you're not raising your hand, I think you're a liar. At any point, this is a really overwhelming space.
Where are the liars in the room?
Please identify yourself with the normies. I got into this work because Ryan and the Google team were starting to build what ended up being the first neuro-inclusive events guide. And it was in 2022, I was at Cannes Lions, which is a really privileged space to be in. And being autistic in those spaces, it's challenging, right? And I almost feel like I'm not allowed to complain because here I am in this beautiful, amazing space, but every night I'm going home, I've lost my ability to speak. I have to lay in bed and just recover, and my peers don't have to do that. It doesn't have to be this way. So we, Ryan, myself, a number of other people at Google and externally started building what at the time was this first really robust guide on how to build accessible physical events. And then we realized it's not just events, it's digital experiences, it's professional spaces. There's so much of our world that is not designed for cognitive well-being. Just take out the neurodiversity of it all. I think a lot of spaces, no shade to Marriott, but spaces like this, there's so the lighting, the colors, there's ways to design for more well-being for all folks where they can actually do their best work and flourish, and it's not a nice to have, but it's fundamental to business outcomes as well.
So what happens, Ryan, when you design at scale for average? What happens then?
You get average results, starting point, which may not even be that real average, going back to what David was saying about the crash test dummies. But it's really hard to try to solve for the full spectrum of needs in the modern environment of cost pressures and the logistical complexity of building places and operating places. And so these things just ultimately they start with good intent, but then they fall off because of the cost, and they fall off because of the logistical effort required to maintain that capability. So they just disappeared in the end, the affordances that we would like there to be.
So who benefits most by designing for normal? When everything does fall to the side, who is benefiting?
I'm not sure that anybody really benefits to the greatest potential. Just as Rachel was saying, everybody has a diverse set of needs, whether you are considered neurodivergent or consider yourselves neurodivergent or not. We all have a diverse set of needs, and it changes throughout the day, it changes throughout the year, it changes with our jobs, it changes with our lives. So everybody at some point needs that curb cut. Everybody at some point could use the lights to be a little bit dimmer and they're not glaring, for the sound environment to be controlled. I mean, those are very simple things, but we're still not achieving those, even though we know those are ideals we should be after for decades now.
So if we remove the concept of normal from design, what happens then if we're designing systems and we remove the word? How does that work?
It completely flips the paradigm. And I mean, you mentioned the word systems, and I think that's crucial here. It's an inversion of how we think about design, because we've kind of looked at design as consisting of more or less a single process, right? The whole double diamond that we've all grown up with it's all been about creating possibilities in order to reduce them down to a single use case, or the main use case. And so all of design has always been sort of built around this idea of refinement towards a single thing, and then, oh yes, we need to add on these extra little bits for whomever. And also our sort of build processes are built like that. We literally have tickets, and we create, and the more tickets you have, the more expensive it becomes, etc. So instead of building on that paradigm and creating more tickets, as it were, we need to flip that whole way of thinking and say, okay, what if there is no single thing that we're building? But what if instead we're starting to build systems in which experiences can then take place? And that sounds maybe a little bit philosophical and ethereal, but A, you know that I was going to make those kinds of points, and B, this is where the technology changes that Ryan was talking about start to really come into their own, because for the first time, thinking about creating the boundary conditions for adaptive and dynamic systems to generate almost experiences on the fly. And we're not quite there yet, so maybe we can talk in a minute about the work that we're doing together and where we are with it versus where we want to go.
Well, let's talk about that now. Ryan, can you dive in a bit for us?
Yeah, so as the co-lead of Google XI, we spend a lot of time in that program thinking about how work is evolving and workplace is evolving. My other job is to lead strategy for something we call Experience Platform, and it's an internal suite of tools that we use to deliver some of these experiences. And that's a lot of different things that have been merging together and evolving for the last few years. And so a lot of this starts with this practical need of we have all of this UX. How do we start to reconcile it and put it into one place? And how do we start to make it of a singular system? At the same time, we want to solve for these needs. Again, not because we're necessarily trying to solve for the edges, but because we're trying to solve more holistically for all of the users. So we started looking at how we could take things like ADA or WCAG that are accessibility guidelines and translate those better into the built environment.
Okay, you've lost me now. What are these? What are these?
So these are standards that are out there. ADA is the American Disabilities Act. That's what's shaped the design of buildings and environments for a while, but it really just regulates the physical stuff, right? And then WCAG, which I don't remember what it stands for, but it helps us.
No one does.
Doesn't matter. It does a similar thing for websites and applications. So there's a lot of work there, but it doesn't quite translate to when you have a media environment, when you have screens and sound and content and behaviors in the environment around you. So we wanted to begin translating that. So we worked with Hypersolid to start to reconcile that work, both the existing user experience, data personas, and user journeys, and all the classical pieces of user experience design, into one bucket and integrate all of this accessibility and greater, more holistic approach. And we found ourselves really developing a data model, but also this ontology, so a definition of what truth is for what the user needs are. And that is really this foundational systemic unblocker for us to be able to build smarter things that are more generalized, like an AI agent might be, but to feed it really high fidelity, nuanced context about what the right outcomes should be. And that's really important in this era of unleashing these agents. They create so much efficiency and enable us to reduce the cost of things and speed the execution or the delivery of them up tremendously. But if we just turn over all of the thinking to them per se, we're going to get results that aren't necessarily great for us. They're going to rush towards the middle and not cover the whole. So this is a way of establishing and defining what the whole is so that those tools can deliver what we need. But it's also a useful tool for us as designers to be able to look at things and understand how we can, with greater fidelity and a more systemic approach ourselves, look at those solutions.
And Rachel, as the new project, where do you fit into the blend here? What's your opinion of what's actually happening with the project work here?
Yeah, I mean, our role is being the lived experience experts, and I am not a technologist, but what I can provide is the point of view with our team of collaborators of what the opportunities are, what the barriers are, what technology often overlooks or, hasn't been considered. I think there's, our specific role is to be the community and understanding the culture and what the broader ecosystem is lacking right now,
Okay.
rather than providing those technical point of views.
What I love about some of the things that Rachel has brought is this focus on creativity. A lot of the things that you've done with the new project have been actually less about the application of standards, but more about coming up with really creative human ways to facilitate whatever needs to happen. Well, I mean, I shouldn't talk for you, but I love some of the examples that you've mentioned before.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of my kind of pet peeves about the accessibility space in general is it gets relegated as a conversation for lawyers, and that's it. And no one wants to talk to lawyers. Like, we want to do creative work, and I think the other angle of that is neurodivergent people often get relegated as like deeply technical people and not deeply creative people. Oftentimes when I disclose that I'm autistic to people, they'll lean in and be like, so you must be a math savant. Like, joke's on you, I can barely add numbers. But I am extremely creative. And I think the media ecosystem has promoted such awful stereotypes of what neurodiversity is. Mm-hmm. So just as one example of a project that we've done, we worked with Getty Images to create a library of self-portraits of autistic people taking photos of themselves. Most representation visually for neurodivergent people, specifically for autistic people, they're all stereotypes. Like, go on Google, type in autism, you're gonna see a bunch of misinformation or stereotypes. So we wanted to approach that from a creative lens, rather than trying to like fix the algorithm. We wanted to flood the visual ecosystem with beautiful photos of actually autistic people. And here the work that we're doing is providing the insight. So it isn't this really technical, this is what the ADA says. We want to say, well, the ADA is amazing, but it actually doesn't consider the empathy that is required to do true accessible work. And providing that insight is really where I think neurodivergent perspectives can really thrive.
If I may add to that, because I think that this is where we're really touching on the opportunity. And I think this whole talk and whatever people should take away from this is about the opportunity more than the problem, right? And,
exactly. Yeah.
So the opportunity and some of the things that I love about your work is to almost free us as designers and technologists and organizers, basically the people responsible for good outcomes, experiences, whatever they might be, to free us up to spend more time thinking about stuff that's actually fun and cool and interesting and unexpected, because that's really where design is at its most powerful. But it's actually not where we spend most of our time today. We spend most of our time sort of, ticking boxes and routing people towards an outcome, and we don't take all these little creative side steps. And I think by designing, by this sort of systematic approach that we're talking about here, and by building this scaffolding for experiences, we can spend so much more time on that part. And not only that, it also becomes less about the designers behind the curtain creating an experience for the people in the space. It also promotes interaction between people in the space, and for them to take a role in the experience itself. It actually provides opportunities for the space itself to become an actor in the experience. And just to make that practical, again, I realize this sounds a bit off the wall, but I worked on a project in the past where we did a lot of research on, let's say, the the problems of workplaces, and how can we use technology to mediate that. And one of the insights was that people actually annoy the hell out of each other at work quite a bit.
No.
Some people do.
My team is here, is that true?
But they also they can't really say anything about it, because they also, if they're a little bit self-aware, they also realize that they also annoy other people, right? So you're kind of always in this bubble where people are chewing on something, or making a loud call, or just whatever it might be that takes you out of your zone, etc. So how do you use the space to mediate that? And we came out with this idea of using sensors to evaluate the noise level in the room, and using lighting to provide sort of, let's say, non-judgmental feedback on the noise. So if the room is really
what does that look like?
So if the room is really quiet, then the color of lighting is, let's say, green in this case. And then if somebody comes in and starts talking loudly, or starts getting into a conversation with somebody, then the color light changes subtly and becomes orange.
So what color is it when people are having a fist fight in the corner?
The lights go out, and you just hear the noise. No, but so you can just agree on these conventions that sort of sit in the periphery. The light subtly changes, and it just gives you a little cue that you are now changing the space, and that may be okay. It could be that everybody's cool with an orange kind of loud space, and that's all right. And then we just transform the space that way. But at least we're actively aware of it.
I think what I appreciate most about like this collective group and how we all function is, I think the three of us have a shared value, although we do very different work, that work doesn't have to fundamentally suck. Like, we can make work better, it can be healthier for people, it doesn't have to consume their whole life. That's such a great example of such a small adjustment you can make in a workspace that I'm assuming is like not very expensive, right? Like sensors, lights, probably like under a couple $100, just a little bit of ingenuity. And I think Ryan identifying this opportunity in his role, bringing in the right resources. I think oftentimes in corporate and professional spaces, we just throw up our hands and we're like, it's gonna be like this and it's terrible. And if you're in a leadership role, or any kind of role of influence, it doesn't have to be that way. There are inexpensive, simple things that you can do.
I want to come back to the sort of business benefit, let's say, but I want to just talk about variability, designing for variability. And Ryan, you've said, invest in the mundane as much as the spectacular. What do you mean by that, and what examples do you have for both?
Well, a lot of, I think, my personal approach to all of this is, I may or may not be a technologist. You can ask my teammates who are in the room.
Did you put your hand up when I asked?
I'd raised my hand for nothing. I want to be mysterious. But I do think a lot about this through the lens of experience design. And I've, worked in the agency side where we're trying to build something that's a brand activation, and you're trying to do something that's novel and spectacular. And it's almost always additive, right? But then also I've worked inside of Google and inside of other large corporations and tried to apply the same lens, because honestly, it was a lot more fun to work if I could use that lens and not have to be a technologist. So for me, that became about realizing that it was a lot more cost effective and just a lot more effective to focus on these mundane moments that are maybe high friction and cause problems, so that the moment you want to shine can shine on its own. You don't have to amplify everything. You don't have to add more. We can spend as much time and effort and money sometimes on the mundane, reduce the risk or reshape it, reduce the friction or reshape it in ways that has, much more like asymmetrical impact on that experience.
Do you have concrete examples to ground this?
So rather than, a really basic thing is digital signage, and we've done a lot of work here. It's, the bigger it gets, the more expensive it gets to produce content. You go to agencies, you have to spend money, you have to have people creating it. So we've spent a lot of our time trying to figure out how we do that with a system that can be generative, meaning it is algorithmic and it can produce things by us turning knobs, and run itself. And that reduces a lot of the cost of doing that, which means we can put this content more places, and this content is helping with wayfinding, and it's helping with orient people and provide redundant information, which is all part of good UX for spaces and helping people navigate places better. So that's pretty mundane, right? That sounds pretty boring. It's not as sexy as some sort of like big digital activation that, gets you on TikTok. But it's really important. And that alone might touch, in a big corporation like Google, tens or hundreds of thousands of people every single day. So I think we need both of those things, but I think we forget to sometimes focus where we really have a lot more agency and a lot more ability to invest than in trying to justify something that's really transformational on the surface, but actually will probably be diluted by the time we deliver it.
I want to ask about inaccessible design. And if 15 to 20%, let's say, is probably a bit more, of the population is neurodivergent, I'll ask you, Rachel, is inaccessible design a DEI issue, or is it like a strategic fail? A systemic
Yeah, I mean,
strategic
listen,
fail?
like, I think the conversation about DE&I in general, from my perspective, it's like DE&I is just culture, right? Like, we all have lived experiences that are diverse in
Yeah.
culture, and, the kind of politicization of that is, just say, frustrating. Insert other opinions there.
Frustrating, you say?
Yeah, I'll save my other opinions for my social media, which I'm not so filtered about. It's a cultural conversation. I don't think it's a cultural conversation where people are not well right now. I don't know a single person, if you ask them, how's your mental health right now?
Who's doing brilliantly? Put your hand up if you're really shining.
And if so, can we have a chat? Because I would like to know.
You, madam.
I think, like, even if your life is going well, there's so much, to Ryan's point, like those simple barriers that are compounding for people. So I don't even think of this as like a DE&I conversation. I think of this as a cultural conversation, because people's mental well-being is so tenuous right now because the basics are not being taken care of for people. And of course, neuro-inclusive design is just like one little piece of that, but because we spend so much time at work,
Yep.
and we spend so much time in these professional spaces, those small affordances we can give people, the smaller mitigations, are massively impactful.
Please.
There's an interesting thing that's emerging right now as well, and within XI, we've been talking with a lot of different other like consultancies and other initiatives that are out there. Like, there's a global brain health initiative, global brain economy initiative that's out of Rice University. And these are things, so there's this notion of a brain economy and brain health that is suddenly taking over the C-suites, and the G20 and across the B20 and all the major business leaders across the globe. And now major companies are big global conglomerates, big oil, big tech, are making big investments in the brain health of their employees.
So who's getting it right?
Well, this is an emergent trend. So this is an interesting thing that's sort of, as DEI has had pressure on it, right? And I think it's hard sometimes to measure or to understand what that means. But brain health and brain economy anchors it back into human health, what's healthy for our brains, how do we have a really effective workforce? And it's all things that are very measurable and backed by neuroscience and other rigorous approaches. So I think there is a moment here to seize that's around us and that's emergent. It's not halfway through like so often it might be, where the values are changing, the language is changing, but the principles are very similar, and the end results should be the same or even better, because we'll have even more investment and sponsorship at government levels.
David, do you want to do
Yeah, I want to build on that, because again, it goes to the point of opportunity here. So I think, and I'm getting quite bored and disappointed about the amount of time that is spent talking about efficiency when it comes to AI. Like so much of the AI conversation is about reducing. And it just doesn't track with the promise of this technology, right? Every other major technology change has been about abundance, has been about increasing the opportunity, has been about doing more. And, you know, I don't want to call out companies by name, but the most successful companies right now...
Name 3.
No, well, okay, fine. Let's say Block as the recent example, firing half their employees in the name of AI efficiency, which A, everybody realizes is bullshit, and B, feels like just such a missed opportunity, right? Can we not use this technology to just be twice as good instead of use half the people? And I think this is where a lot of what we're trying to achieve with this project, that's what that is all about. If we can, and again, if we can relegate some of the heavy lifting of design to systems, but not probabilistic systems, to Ryan's point, because they, again, to use another difficult word, these kind of stochastic systems that trend towards this kind of middle reality and doesn't have a lot of edge cases. That's the downside of AI, and so we need to create, we need to pull those opportunities out from the middle towards the sides where appropriate.
Yeah, it's the risk, and we have to manage that risk and find ways of making sure that it addresses the breadth of needs.
Right, right.
So what should business leaders be asking themselves these days? I can see your brain working, Ryan.
I mean, I think they should ask themselves a lot of things. I think one of the things they have to question is if what they've learned and been taught and valued for the last 20 years still holds true when there's such a fundamental shift.
And if they've even asked the right questions.
Exactly, and are the skills of yesterday at all applicable? And as we talk about reskilling, I think a lot of it is unskilling so that we can maybe return back to some common sense things like we used to give ourselves more time to think about things before we did it, and now we rush straight into a tool, get immediate results, and go act on it. And often without even assessing the results, and that's called cognitive offloading. And basically, the studies show that if you use that, when the AI is right, you're right, and when the AI is wrong, you're wrong. And so, you know, there's no point in you even being there at that point.
So where does AI get risky, Rachel, for neurodivergent people? Where are the risks?
Yeah, I mean, listen, AI can be an amazing tool, as many of you know, for accessibility. I often refer to it as my neurotypical bestie when I'm like, I don't want to sound like an asshole in an email, so how do I sound a little bit less blunt?
Do you name your AI?
No, it's just Claude.
But it's a she, though.
No, it's a, I was going to say she. I don't know why. Claude is a he. Boss men, more normalized bossing men around.
Okay.
So there's a lot of benefits to it, right? Where I've found, and a lot of my collaborators with the new project, where we oftentimes pause and get frustrated is we have to ask, like, what kind of standards are we setting if we are communicating to a neurotypical standard, right? Even if you're training your AI to speak exactly as you would want, when I'm telling it to tone something down or say it a little bit less bluntly or whatever, you know, that's a form of digital masking. And masking is kind of hiding your disability. It can be quite taxing. It can lead to depression and anxiety and a lot of other challenges. So I think we have to ask, what kind of standards are we upholding, right? Like, there's ways to navigate professional situations that might mitigate long-term challenges or headaches for you, but other times, you know, similar to women having to conform themselves, how Black people have to conform themselves into professional spaces. I think it's similar here for neurodivergent folks, maybe having to hide who they are. So I think there's benefits, but there's also deep challenges to reinforcing stereotypes.
And David, from your perspective, what are the implications for design resulting from AI long term?
again,
Is that a big
it's got a lot of
question?
implications. It's got a lot of implications. But first, to build on Rachel's point, because I really like that. Again, I think maybe it's fairly safe to ask yourself regularly if you can flip the way we do. I know, and this is the point that both of you, I think, are making. Like, can we look at this situation quite a different light as a result of the new situation that we're in? Can we instead of using AI to mask, can we use AI to normalize variety?
Like create better understanding between people,
Yes,
right? Like
or-
I don't
or
think
have-
anyone's ever like put my emails into Claude and said, like, from an autistic
Exactly.
perspective, what does she mean by
Yes,
this,
yes,
right?
exactly.
Whereas frequently autistic people will say, can you help me understand what they're really trying to say, right?
And even creating environments that are ostensibly designed for a varied set of people and varied needs already creates a sense of welcoming, a sense of inclusion, and it doesn't feel like you create a bunch of different holes for people to, or like different routes for people to follow depending on who they are. No, you basically say that this whole space supports various needs. You can have one, to build on the wayfinding example, you can have one way to show that that's where you need to go, or maybe we need to have multiple routes, and some are a little bit longer, but they're also maybe a little bit quieter, and some are shorter, and just having that opportunity to be able to go in 3 different ways to where you need to go, that makes the space already tell a story about what it needs to be for everybody.
So what should we absolutely not automate?
Creativity.
That's well, it's an interesting question, because you would start with some quick assumptions of like our own creativity, but then when you dig into it, I don't know, like there are pieces. I think it's more about the question is more about where do we want to retain control? Where do we make sure, and how do we make sure that
I can
we
hear
get to make
clicks in the
decisions?
audience. Someone agrees.
So I think, even in questions like that, we're surrendering ourselves over to this tool that we've created.
Right.
We have to consistently and relearn this to recenter these questions back to what does the human need or want, and then from there figure out how the tool can help us. And I think that is, in many ways, going back to your question about corporate leaders. And it's not just the CEOs and CFOs, it's everybody through the organization. They have to relearn to think about themselves and their fellow humans first, and the tool second.
So what responsibility then do technologists have these days that they just didn't have 10 years ago?
I don't think the responsibilities are different. I think the risks are higher.
Meaning?
Meaning that there is so much more power in some ways, but also so much more capability to move so fast. You have impacts before you even register that they're negative impacts. And you can go so deep into a failure mode. So I think it's a change in risk management strategies and just personal risk taking. We have to take more personal risk, but we also have to learn how to do that in manageable ways.
Any thoughts, David?
Yeah, I was going to say that the feedback loop becomes really important. So both from a systems perspective, this new field of mechanistic interpretability, where you're trying to sort of understand what the AI system is actually doing so that you can have an opinion about it. That's one new field that we need to invest a lot of time in, because otherwise it becomes an increasingly important or big black box, let's say. But also the way that we I lost my train of thought. That's okay. But the feedback loops, I think, is important. So understanding. The other point was about incentives. I think social media is a great example, and it's a bit beaten to death, this horse. But this idea that we had, we created a set of incentive structures that then created a very much an out of control system that was very bad for humanity. And AI systems have that same risk, right? So we constantly need to be evaluating what are the incentives, how are we incentivizing the system, and then what is the system doing with that? How is it kind of interpreting our well-meaning comments, or whatever you want to call it, and can we keep control of that? I think it's...
I want to just move on because we're running out of time and I still have 27,000 questions. I'll ask two. In the next 5 years, what is going to be embarrassingly out of date and outmoded, looking 5 years in the future? What do you think? Any thoughts, anybody?
I think most of corporate life right now. I just...
You've taken it on a much broader plane than I was expecting.
I just think about the physical design of offices. I think about down to the digital signage. It does not meet the place that we are at with technology, with AI, and it certainly does not meet the place where people are at culturally, emotionally, socially. You talk to any Gen Z young person today, how do you feel about corporate life? Not going to be not so great responses around it. And I think if we both want to foster new talent and the best talent, I think the work that XI does at Google is a good example of being more experimental, but taking those prototypes into something more pragmatic. So I think there's a really big opportunity to think about how we reimagine all of that.
So what would you, if the audience go away and, talk with their teams, and next week, what's one thing that you would encourage the audience to be thinking about and to be moving forward with?
I'd love to hear from these guys on that, actually.
What do you want the future to be, and what action can you go take right now that's a little step in that direction? If we keep doing that, that compounds.
Mm-hmm. David?
Yeah, I heard the Chief Design Officer, or whatever her title is, from Claude bash the double diamond and say the design methodology is dead, and then of course there's a lot of backlash on that. But I think she has a point. I don't think it's dead, or those are never helpful terms, but it is not going to be essential anymore to the way that we think about designing experiences as it has been. And it can still be useful. Wireframes are also, I think, horrible, excuse me. But they can be useful. They shouldn't be an end in itself. They can be a means to an end. So I think what I'm working on with my teams is to think about this experience system opportunity. Like if we start to really see everything that we design as, by definition, being part of a system, because everything is, but then also as an opportunity to create a system that can sit within a bigger system. Then the kinds of outputs, the things that you pay attention to, the things that you spend a lot of time on versus not very much time, really start to become very different. And to be honest with you, we're also at the start of this process. We haven't figured it out. I don't know that anybody has figured it out. If so, come talk to me after, because I'm really curious what your learnings are. So this is an ongoing process by all means, but it's fun. I've been around for a while in this business, and I was around when the internet sort of started to become really a thing, and I feel that same kind of excitement that I felt then, of like, holy shit, this really means a reset, new opportunities, things that we haven't really thought about, and it's just a privilege to be going through that again, to have that opportunity again.
And Rachel, from your perspective, what would you encourage the audience to step outside of this room and think about and implement going forward?
It's something that I tell people all the time with the work that we do with the new project. It's like a really simple thing that you can ask, which is, how do you do your best work?
Mm-hmm. And how do you? Just asking for a friend.
I mean, I think getting very clear on what you actually need to do your best work. This is so silly, but I literally do my best work laying on the floor in my office. That's not professional.
Anybody else lay on the floor of their office and do their best work?
Yeah, lots of you. Like,
wow,
floor sitting is
more
awesome.
hands than I was expecting. I need to do this.
Or when you're in a corporate, when I was working in corporate, I would sit in conference rooms with the lights off and people would turn the lights on. And I'd be like, can you please not do that? And there's such small things and we ignore those small things as us being needy. I don't think so. I think it's actually just people being more in tune with, we all have very different experiences with how we process information, how we communicate. Doesn't make you a bad person for wanting to honor that. And there's small things you can do in corporate life that have huge impacts on people's abilities and their growth trajectory.
Let's end on one question each, and let's do a quick fire. David, what is the most important skill for designers in the future, do you believe?
I think conceptual thinking, particularly in experience design, we tend to, well, let's not go there. Sorry, I'm catching myself before I go off on a philosophical ramble. Go
on, ramble. I'll cut you off.
Okay, so there's this amazing old book called Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, and it's about seeing the world from a holistic versus a reductionistic perspective. And I think experience designers and designers in general have done a lot of reductionist thinking, breaking things into pieces and understanding the whole through understanding the pieces. And I also don't think we should go all the way the other end. There is this balance, which is also, by the way, the conclusion of the book, but spoiler alert, read it anyway. But conceptual thinking forces you to think both about the whole, the concept, like what actually is this thing and what is the, because a lot of meaning flows out of understanding what the thing is that you're trying to make that you don't get to if you try and build it up from little Lego pieces.
So your tip is conceptual thinking?
Yes.
Great.
Yes.
See, I crystallized that.
Yes, thank you.
I crystallized it. Ryan, what is the biggest opportunity right now for business leaders?
Embrace inefficiency. Because that's where innovation comes from. It's when it happens.
Love it.
Why does innovation come from efficiency?
Because you have to have room for error. You
Right.
have to have room for chance. You have to have room for
Oh, you
pause,
said,
iteration.
sorry, I want to clarify. Did you say inefficiency?
Yes.
Embrace inefficiency.
Great, we're embracing inefficiency. Any other champions of inefficiency in the room? Yes! We see you, we see you. Embrace inefficiency. I got it. I misheard and I didn't understand. Good. Thank you. Really glad I clarified that. Rachel, let's finish up. What mindset shift could we be making right now, immediately, to set us on the best path?
I think if people were more curious about each other,
Oh, that's nice.
we would be in a much better place. I think there's a lot of obsession with certainty and efficiency, and I think this obsession with certainty is killing creativity. It's killing the next wave of innovation. I think it kind of goes hand in hand with what Ryan is saying. But part of that curiosity is mostly being curious about other people.
Love it, yeah. So embrace inefficiency, stay curious, and conceptual thinking. Brilliant. I want to thank the audience. Thank you so much for being here in this room. I know you've got many choices in your life. You chose us. I heart you. Oops. I want to thank Rachel Lowenstein, David Vogel, and Ryan Howard. And I've been Kerry Finch. Over and out. Yeah. If anybody has a question, please step up to the mic. There he is. What's your name and where'd you come from, sir?
My name is Marcin. I come from Poland.
Perfect.
I've been sitting here thinking about what to ask, and that question keeps evolving as you guys keep talking. But there's something...
Snappy questions.
It's not going to be snappy. You have to allow me to get there. But there's something missing in all of this. There's something pragmatic, right? I mean, I was really interested in the subject of this session precisely because of the how do we fix it piece. And I think there's a tendency to think of accessibility, you guys covered this at the very beginning, as something reactive, something done after the fact, something we kind of almost apologize for.
So what's your question?
I guess, yeah, how do we change that?
How do we fix it?
But
His
hold on,
question-
but it's very specific. How do we change that? Where's the money? Where's the person up here talking about money? How do you leave 20% of the market out? Who's okay with that?
Okay.
Cutting curbs actually made money for the city.
Your question is, how do we fix it? Where's the money?
That's where I think this opportunity of this new emergent focus on the brain health of workforce and the brain economy is important, because there's a lot of money that's being invested there. And there's a lot of science that's being invested there, and there's going to be a lot of innovation in that space. And that unlocks systemic investment, and the systemic investments are the way to unblock systemic blockers, right? You can't attack a systemic blocker like, the high economic cost to enabling these affordances by coming up with one product. You have to attack it systemically at almost like an economic level, and that's what I think this new opportunity is.
I also
Brilliant.
think about one other
Rachel.
thing. I also think about engagement. When we're talking to brands about this and partners like Google or Marriott or whoever we're working with, we talk about disengagement costing the global combined GDP over $8 trillion every single year. If people are not engaged in professional spaces because they are just struggling to survive, it's a lot of money that you're losing. So there's multiple angles that you can talk about it with. Engagement just happens to be one that I think is particularly effective.
Brilliant, thank you. Sir, what's your name? Where'd you come from?
Right. Hi, I'm Jose. Thanks for your panel. I was thinking about, and I'm fascinated about the idea of helping people that are neurodiverse make the transition from burnout, confusion, not knowing how to really organize, having a backlog, a whole life, right, even of trauma, right, and make it to a point in which they can thrive in the workplace. And I know that a part of that is done in therapy, right, maybe with a shaman as well. But then there's another part which is like building the so-called scaffolding around
So what's your question, sir?
My question would be, what responsibility, on who relies this responsibility of building this scaffolding? Is it the experience in corporate, or is it from the side of the person personally? And if it's personal, and it's going to be personal to a certain extent, is there a way that corporate can support that, and in what ways?
Good question.
Wellness program?
Who's on this?
I think our whole argument is that it has historically been personal. Like, it's always been on us as neurodiverse individuals to figure it out. And I think Rachel spoke eloquently about that. And so our point is that there is an opportunity now that there wasn't before, because the economics have changed, to shift that responsibility to corporate. And everybody has individual responsibilities to make sure that they're the happiest person they can be. And so there's always going to be things that you can do yourself. But our argument is there is both the necessity and the opportunity for businesses to start playing a much more active role there.
The one thing I'll add too is I think there is an element for neurodivergent people to have a level of understanding of what you actually need. A lot of people that I talk to on my social media don't understand what they're even asking for. They just know that they're struggling. And I understand that, right? When you're really burnt out and tired, it's hard to orient how you can make your life better in corporate. But I think unless you take that time, there's only so much that a leader or a business can do for you if you're not very clear on what you're actually struggling with or what the accommodation needs to be.
Brilliant, thank you for your question. Sir, what's your name and where'd you come from?
Hi, I'm Pedro. I'm from Brazil. I'm one of those cases that I don't have a diagnosis, but everyone is pretty sure. Yeah.
Same here.
I have a quick question and a spicy question. The quick one is, what's the name of the book again?
Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. by
Zen
Robert
and
M.
the Art
Pirsig.
of Motorcycle Maintenance.
It's a classic.
It's a classic.
Okay, got it. And the spicy one is, in Brazil, we have this regulation called NR1. It used to regulate about a chemical hazard in the work environment or physical hazard. And now in 2026, it also regulates about psychosocial hazard. So it became a law that companies have to look like into mental health and things like that. My question is, what is the Like, what is the place that government and regulators have in this conversation? Because in Brazil, like that, this became a legal problem for companies. So companies have to act on it.
Are you asking, like, how we convince the government to put regulations in place?
Yes.
I don't have that answer.
We have RFK in
All
charge of our
governments, not only like.
You're not going to solve that problem in this room.
Yeah.
I will go back to, though, it's really important to understand where investment is going,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And I'm not saying we all have access to the same initiatives. What I am saying is that if you can point to something that governments and major corporations are doing and investing in your own team, whatever scale it is, you can say, but this is where investment is important. And it's the same effect we get when some whatever startup founder lays off half the workforce because they thought it was cool because someone else bigger and richer did it. So we can use the same copycat tactics to our benefit, if you will.
And we are building the system in such a way that you can sort of, and Brian talked about this before, we're using sort of existing standard bodies and existing guidelines. We're creating the opportunity for governance structures to also be part of this system. So we're building the system in a sort of a modular way that allows us to incorporate different sources of authority, whether they be at a corporate level or at a governmental level. And so we can build systems in such a way.
Okay. Thank you so much, everybody, for your time. If you want to continue the conversation, there is such thing as a QR code right there. And also, these folks will be milling around for some moments just after. But I want to thank everybody for sticking around. Thank you, those who asked a question. And thank you again to the panel. Well done, everyone.